What if everything you've been taught about ancient human civilization is a carefully constructed lie? What if advanced civilizations existed tens of thousands of years ago, with technology and knowledge that modern science refuses to acknowledge? What if giants, real 7-meter-tall beings, once walked the earth, leaving behind tools and structures that defy conventional archaeology? Today, I'm going to show you evidence so shocking, so absolutely devastating to mainstream historical narratives, that governments, religious institutions, and academic establishments have spent decades suppressing, confiscating, and destroying it. We're talking about 50,000 golden artifacts that mysteriously vanished after a Catholic priest documented them. We're talking about 7-meter giant skeletons discovered by credible archaeologists, only to disappear from museums after their deaths. We're talking about metal libraries containing unknown languages that military forces now guard under extreme surveillance. This is on conspiracy theory. This is documented archaeological evidence that has been systematically hidden from the public for over 50 years. And by the end of this investigation, you'll understand exactly why this evidence terrifies those in power. But I must warn you, once you see this evidence, once you understand the scope of what's been hidden from humanity, you can never look at official history the same way again. The implications are so profound, so paradigm-shattering, that they fundamentally challenge our understanding of human origins, ancient civilizations, and our place in the cosmos. So if you're comfortable with conventional historical narratives, if you prefer the safety of textbook explanations, this might not be the video for you. But if you're ready to confront the possibility that everything we've been taught is wrong, then let's dive into the most suppressed archaeological discoveries in human history: the Sumerian global empire. Let's start with a revelation that will fundamentally change how you understand ancient history. The Sumerian civilization didn't just exist in Mesopotamia. New evidence suggests they established a global empire, spreading their advanced knowledge and technology across every continent on Earth. For decades, mainstream archaeology has insisted that the Sumerians were confined to the region between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. But mounting evidence reveals something far more extraordinary: Sumerian symbols. Technology and cultural practices appear in South America, North America, Asia, and even isolated Pacific islands. How is this possible, according to ancient texts? The beings, the Sumerians called the Anunnaki, literally meaning those who came from heaven to earth, were just local gods. They were global administrators, establishing outposts and civilizations across the planet. The evidence is overwhelming. Identical astronomical knowledge appears in civilizations that supposedly never contacted each other. The Pleiades star cluster, which requires telescopes to fully observe, was known and revered by Babylonians, Mayans, Aztecs, Chinese, Australian Aborigines, and Maori peoples. They all called them by similar names and attributed similar significance to them. But here's what's truly shocking. These weren't just mythological stories. Recent archaeological discoveries reveal physical evidence of advanced pre-Columbian civilizations in the Americas that possessed Mesopotamian-style artifacts, architecture, and even writing systems. The most dramatic example comes from Ecuador, where a Catholic priest named Father Carlo Crespi documented over 50,000 ancient artifacts given to him by local indigenous peoples. These weren't typical South American artifacts. They contained Sumerian cuneiform-style writing, Babylonian religious symbols, and technological depictions that matched nothing in known pre-Columbian cultures. Father Crespi himself stated on camera that these artifacts were not of Ecuadorian origin, but Babylonian. Think about the implications. A Catholic priest, trained in archaeology at the University of Milan, examining artifacts for 59 years, concluding they represented Mesopotamian civilization in South America. This wasn't an isolated case. Throughout the Americas, we find architectural techniques, astronomical alignments, and cultural practices that mirror those of ancient Mesopotamia, suggesting a common source of advanced knowledge that was disseminated globally. Book of Giants. Lost manuscripts decoded. Now we come to one of the most significant archaeological discoveries of the 20th century, and one that's been almost completely suppressed by mainstream academia: the Book of Giants fragments found among the Dead Sea Scrolls. These ancient manuscripts provide detailed accounts of the world before the global flood, describing a civilization dominated by hybrid giant beings who ruled over human populations. But unlike typical mythological texts, the Book of Giants reads like historical documentation, providing specific names, locations, and events. The manuscript describes giants like Oja and Haha, names that correspond to other ancient texts, including the biblical Og, king of Bashan, and Gilgamesh of Mesopotamian epic literature. But here's what's crucial. These weren't separate mythological traditions. They were describing the same historical figures and events. The Book of Giants explains that these beings were the offspring of the Watchers, angelic entities who descended to Earth and interbred with human women, creating a race of giants who possessed advanced knowledge but became increasingly corrupt and destructive. What's particularly disturbing is the manuscript's description of the giants' final days. They begin having prophetic dreams about their coming destruction, desperately seeking interpretation from Enoch, one of the few pure humans who maintained contact with the divine realm. The dreams consistently feature the same imagery: gardens being destroyed by fire, trees being uprooted, and waters covering the earth. The giants realize their civilization is doomed, but their requests for divine intervention are denied. The genetic contamination has gone too far. Most significantly, the text describes the giant Mahuya making an extraordinary journey, flying through space to consult with Enoch, who had been taken to the heavenly realm. The manuscript warns him about flying too close to the sun, suggesting these beings had limited physical capabilities despite their advanced technology. This space travel account isn't unique to the Book of Giants. The Book of Enoch contains detailed astronomical information that was impossible for ancient peoples to know without advanced observational technology. It describes the movements of celestial bodies, the structure of the cosmos, and even mentions multiple inhabited worlds. The implications are staggering. These texts suggest that advanced beings with space travel capabilities were involved in Earth's ancient history, establishing civilizations, conducting genetic experiments, and ultimately being destroyed by a global catastrophe. Father Crespi's forbidden collection. Now let us examine one of the most documented yet suppressed archaeological discoveries in modern history: Father Carlo Crespi's extraordinary collection of ancient artifacts in Ecuador. Father Crespi wasn't some fringe researcher or treasure hunter. He was a respected Salesian priest, educated in anthropology at the University of Milan, who spent 59 years working with indigenous peoples in Cuenca, Ecuador. His academic credentials were impeccable, his character beyond reproach. Starting in the 1920s, local Shuar Indians began bringing Father Crespi gifts in appreciation for his humanitarian work. These weren't typical indigenous artifacts. They were sophisticated metalwork pieces, many crafted from pure gold, containing symbols and artistic styles that didn't match any known South American culture. Over nearly 6 decades, Father Crespi accumulated more than 50,000 of these artifacts. The collection became so extensive that the Vatican granted him permission to establish a museum to house them. The artifacts filled entire rooms of the Auxiliadora Church, representing millions of dollars in precious metals alone. But the real value wasn't monetary. American explorer Richard Wingate, who photographed the collection in the 1970s, described it as the most valuable archaeological treasure on Earth. He noted artifacts that appeared to be Assyrian, Egyptian, Chinese, and African in origin, all found in Ecuador, thousands of miles from their supposed origins. The most controversial pieces showed clear Mesopotamian influences: Lamassu figures, winged bulls with human heads that were exclusively Babylonian. Religious symbols appeared identical to those found in Iraqi archaeological sites. Cuneiform-style writing covered metal plates. Astronomical symbols matched those found in Sumerian temples. Father Crespi himself, speaking on camera, confirmed that these artifacts were not of Ecuadorian origin, but Babylonian. This wasn't speculation from an amateur enthusiast. This was the professional assessment of a university-trained archaeologist with 6 decades of hands-on experience. But here's where the story becomes sinister. In 1962, a mysterious fire destroyed a significant portion of the collection. After Father Crespi's death in 1982, the remaining artifacts simply vanished. Some reports claim they were sold to private collectors, others suggest they were shipped to the Vatican, Still others indicate they were seized by Ecuadorian military forces. Today, only a few photographs and film footage remain as evidence of what may have been the most important archaeological discovery in South American history: the physical artifacts. 50,000 pieces of evidence that could have rewritten our understanding of ancient global civilizations are gone. The metal library mystery and government cover-up, the disappearance of Father Crespi. Artifacts becomes even more suspicious when we examine the source of these incredible pieces. A vast underground complex known as the Cueva de los Teos, Cave of the Oilbirds. According to multiple witness accounts from the 1970s, this cave system in Ecuador's Amazon region contained what can only be described as an ancient library. Thousands of metal plates covered with unknown hieroglyphs, stored on shelves in organized fashion within the caverns. The explorer Juan Morich claimed to have discovered these metal books, each weighing approximately 20 kilograms and containing symbols that didn't match any known writing system. The library allegedly contained two sections, one with lighter golden plates, and another with harder, more polished rectangular plates that were translucent with parallel engraved channels. But the metal library was just part of what witnesses described finding in the cave system. They reported hundreds of statues with zoomorphic and human figures, metal bars of various shapes, objects covered with semi-precious stones, and most significantly, a sarcophagus made of translucent material containing an enormous human skeleton, possibly a giant. They also described finding a crown so large that for normal human heads could easily fit inside. It clear evidence of beings much larger than modern humans.
Wow.
The location of this underground library was precisely documented, near the southern border of Ecuador's Pleiades province, camouflaged below river level within a treacherous section of cave systems extending 4 kilometers. But here's where the government cover-up becomes obvious. Despite the extraordinary nature of these claims, no official archaeological expedition was ever mounted to investigate. When independent researchers attempted to explore the caves, they were denied permits or faced military intervention. Today, the areas around Cueva de los Teos are under strict military surveillance. The metal plates that were supposedly recovered and examined have been declared worthless fakes by official sources, yet they remain under heavy guard in secured government facilities. Dr. Luis Alvarez of the Salesian Polytechnic University dismissed the plates as cheap aluminum with no archaeological value. Yet could I explain why they required military protection? Or why they weren't simply returned to researchers for further study? The contradictions are glaring. If these artifacts are worthless fakes, why the secrecy? Why the military guard? Why have they never been properly studied by independent archaeologists? The official explanations make no sense, suggesting a deliberate effort to suppress evidence of something that threatens established historical narratives. 7-meter giants of Ecuador, suppressed evidence. The metal library wasn't the only extraordinary discovery made in Ecuador during this period. In the 1970s, another Catholic priest made a discovery that was even more shocking and predictably even more thoroughly suppressed. Father Carlos Vaca Alvarado, a parish priest in the town of Changamina, who had studied archaeology, discovered an enormous human skeleton measuring approximately 7 meters in height in the Amazon mountains of Ecuador. This wasn't a random collection of bones that could be misinterpreted. 7 fragments of the skeleton were carefully analyzed by specialists, who concluded it definitely belonged to a human being, just one that was 7 times larger than modern humans. Father Vaca appeared on Ecuadorian national television to discuss his discovery, providing detailed measurements and photographic evidence. The skeleton was real, it was genuine, and it represented a human of impossible size, according to conventional understanding of human development. But the discovery becomes even more significant when we consider its location. Local Andean legends called the area where the skeleton was found the Cemetery of the Gods, claiming it had once been inhabited by a civilization of giants. This connects directly to another suppressed discovery made by explorers in Ecuador's virgin forests, an 80-meter-high pyramid hidden in dense jungle, surrounded by tools that were 4 times larger than conventional human implements. These weren't ceremonial objects, they were functional tools designed for beings much larger than modern humans. The explorers who made this discovery called it the Lost City of Giants, correlating with local legends about the Cemetery of the Gods. The evidence suggested an entire civilization of giant beings had once inhabited this region, leaving behind architecture and tools scaled to their enormous size. Yet despite the extraordinary nature of these discoveries, no official archaeological support was provided. No funding was allocated for further research. No academic institutions showed interest in investigating what could have been the most significant anthropological discovery in South American history. And predictably, after Father Vaca's death, the 7-meter skeleton disappeared completely. Today, only a replica exists in the Mystery Park Museum in Switzerland. The actual physical evidence, bones that could have been scientifically analyzed to determine age, diet, genetic makeup, and cause of death, is gone. This pattern of discovery followed by suppression and disappearance is so consistent that it cannot be coincidental. Someone or some organization is systematically eliminating evidence of giant humans from the archaeological record. Olmec civilization, ancient African-Asian connection. The suppression of giant evidence becomes even more suspicious. When we examine other archaeological anomalies that challenge conventional historical narratives, particularly the mysterious Olmec civilization of Mesoamerica, the Olmecs are officially considered the first advanced civilization of the Americas, dating back to approximately 4,000 to 8,000 years ago. But mainstream archaeology faces a fundamental problem. The Olmecs possessed African physical features in a continent where African populations supposedly did unexist until after 1400 CE. The evidence is undeniable. The colossal Olmec heads, massive stone sculptures weighing up to 50 tons each, display distinctly African facial features, broad noses, full lips, and facial structures that don't match any known indigenous American populations. But it gets more complex. Some Olmec sculptures show clearly Asian features, suggesting this civilization represented multiple ethnic groups that somehow arrived in the Americas thousands of years before such contact was supposedly possible. How do we explain African and Asian populations in ancient America? The conventional explanation is that these were simply artistic interpretations by indigenous peoples. But this does unaccount for the anatomical precision of the sculptures or their massive scale and distribution across vast areas. The alternative explanation is that advanced maritime civilizations existed thousands of years ago, capable of crossing oceans and establishing colonies on distant continents. This aligns perfectly with evidence of Sumerian global expansion and explains the presence of Mesopotamian-style artifacts in South America. Ancient Chinese records support this interpretation. Historical documents describe the first Chinese emperors as having been black-skinned, suggesting African populations were present in Asia before the development of modern ethnic distinctions. The Chinese historical text Shu King describes Emperor Yu dealing with the effects of a great flood that devastated the earth, the same global flood described in Mesopotamian, Hebrew, and numerous other ancient traditions. Another Chinese manuscript, the history recorded in bamboo, describes leader Chen as having been black, clearly indicating he wasn't of typical Chinese ethnicity, but married into local populations, giving rise to the Asian ethnic groups we know today. This pattern of advanced pre-flood civilizations spreading across continents, intermarrying with local populations, and establishing hybrid cultures explains the global distribution of similar technologies, astronomical knowledge, and architectural techniques that mainstream archaeology struggles to explain. Pleiades knowledge, impossible ancient astronomy. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence for ancient global civilization is the universal knowledge of the Pleiades star cluster. Among ancient cultures that supposedly never had contact with each other, Pleiades, a cluster of stars in the constellation Taurus, are among the most mysterious objects in deep space. While they appear as a handful of stars to the naked eye, detailed knowledge of their structure requires advanced observational technology. Yet this knowledge appears in the texts and monuments of ancient civilizations worldwide. Babylonians, Aztecs, Persian cultures, Pacific Island peoples, all possess detailed information about the Pleiades and attributed similar spiritual significance to them. The Babylonians called them Mumu, meaning stars of stars. The Mayans incorporated them into complex calendar systems. The Incas used them for agricultural timing. Australian Aborigines created elaborate dreamtime stories about them. North American tribes called them the Seven Sisters and used them for navigation. This isn't just general stargazing. These cultures possessed specific astronomical data about the Pleiades that should have been impossible to obtain without telescopes. They knew about stars within the cluster that are invisible to naked eye observation. They understood the cluster's movement patterns across celestial cycles spanning thousands of years. How did isolated civilizations around the world obtain identical, advanced astronomical knowledge? The conventional explanation is convergent development. The idea that humans naturally developed similar astronomical interests independently, but this doesn't explain the specificity and accuracy of the information. The alternative explanation is that this knowledge was disseminated by a common source, advanced beings, who traveled between different human populations, teaching them astronomical science as part of a broader educational program. The Book of Enoch supports this interpretation, describing the fallen angels teaching humans the resolving of enchantments and the knowledge of the clouds, the signs of the earth, the signs of the sun, and the course of the moon. This was unprimitive star worship. It was advanced scientific education being provided to early human civilizations by beings with sophisticated understanding of cosmic mechanics. The choice of the Pleiades as a common focus is particularly significant. In biblical numerology, 7 represents divine perfection, the completion of God's creation. The fallen angels choosing a 7-star cluster as their symbol suggests a deliberate attempt to imitate or usurp divine authority. Global Anunnaki influence. The final truth. Now we can see the complete picture of what archaeological evidence really reveals about ancient human civilization.
Oh.
The Sumerian Anunnaki weren't just Mesopotamian gods, they were global, administrators of a worldwide civilization that existed before the Great Flood. These beings, described consistently across cultures as those who came from the sky, established outposts on every continent, teaching advanced technology, astronomy, metallurgy, architecture, and agricultural techniques to early human populations. Physical artifacts, Sumerian-style symbols and technology found in South America. Identical astronomical knowledge shared globally. Advanced metallurgy and architecture appearing simultaneously in isolated regions. Genetic evidence. Ancient texts from multiple cultures describing genetic manipulation and hybrid offspring. Archaeological evidence of unusually large humans, cultural memories of giant rulers, and their eventual destruction. Textual records. The Book of Giants describing space travel and global civilization. Sumerian tablets referencing worldwide operations. Hebrew texts describing global corruption requiring worldwide cleansing. Architectural evidence. Massive stone structures requiring advanced technology appearing globally. Underground tunnel systems and chambers designed for beings larger than modern humans. Astronomical alignments proving advanced mathematical knowledge. But here's the crucial point. This global civilization was destroyed by a worldwide sea catastrophe that ancient texts consistently describe as a great flood. The survivors were those who had maintained genetic purity and moral integrity, who were preserved to restart human civilization. The flood was a random natural disaster. It was environmental remediation to eliminate genetic contamination and technological corruption that threatened the planet's entire ecosystem. Post-flood civilizations like the Egyptians, Chinese, Indians, and Americans inherited fragments of pre-flood knowledge, but without understanding its full context. They built upon ruins of earlier civilizations, adapted technologies they didn't fully understand, and preserved cultural memories of their giant predecessors as religious mythology. Modern cover-up. Why this evidence is hidden? So why is this evidence systematically suppressed? Why do governments, academic institutions, and religious organizations work together to hide archaeological discoveries that prove advanced pre-flood civilization? The answer is simple. This evidence threatens the fundamental control structures of modern civilization. If humanity understood its true origins, its real capabilities, and the cyclic nature of civilizational rise and fall, current power structures would become obsolete. Religious implications. This evidence proves that ancient religious texts were historical records, not mythology. It validates accounts of divine intervention, genetic manipulation, and moral judgment that challenge modern secular humanism. Scientific implications. It demonstrates that human civilization has existed far longer than officially acknowledged, with capabilities that exceed our current technology. This threatens scientific materialism and evolutionary theory. Political implications. It suggests that secret knowledge has been preserved by certain groups throughout history, creating power imbalances based on information rather than merit. It implies that ordinary humans have capabilities that have been systematically suppressed. Economic implications. Advanced ancient technology, if recovered and understood, could make current energy, transportation, and manufacturing systems obsolete, destroying trillions of dollars in existing investments. The systematic disappearance of evidence. Father Crespi's, 50,000 artifacts. Father Vaca's, giant skeleton, the metal library plates, giant tools and architecture, isn't coincidental. It's a coordinated effort to maintain official historical narratives that serve existing power structures. But the evidence continues to emerge. New discoveries are being made. New texts are being translated. New archaeological sites are being uncovered. The truth about humanity's ancient origins and capabilities cannot be permanently suppressed. The question is, what will we do with this knowledge? Will we continue to accept official explanations that make no sense? Or will we have the courage to acknowledge that our ancestors were far more advanced, far more knowledgeable, and far more connected to cosmic realities than we've been led to believe? The choice is ours. But the evidence is undeniable. We are not the first advanced civilization on Earth, and we probably won't be the last. The cycle continues, and understanding it may be the key to transcending it. The ancient texts were unjust stories. They were warnings and instruction manuals for a species with extraordinary potential that has been systematically taught to limit itself. Now that you know the truth, the question is, what will you do with it? The future of human civilization may depend on how we answer that question.